Hi, I'm Lance Lambert. Thanks for tuning in to the Vintage Vehicle Show. We are in Bellevue, Washington at the All Mopar Spring Roundup. This is an annual car show. It's a great show. There are Chryslers, Dodges, Plymouths, just everything you can think of under the Mopar banner. Wonderful show, a little bit windy today, but we're going to have a great time anyway. You're going to meet some wonderful people, see some great cars, and hear some good music. So what do I tell you to do every week? I want you to kick back, relax, and enjoy the show. George Tyler is a gentleman that I see at a lot of car shows all over the area, and he is driving an absolutely gorgeous 1963 Dodge Polara, and you're going to tell us a little secret about this.
Well, it's a Ram Charger Max-Wedge clone.
We're going to talk about the clone bit in just a bit, but tell me the history of the car and what you've done to it. And was this a rusting hulk at one time, and now it is what it is today, or is it in pretty good shape when you started?
Well, actually, I bought it 15 years ago. It was a 114,000-mile car. I've been pretty well taken care of, third owner, and very little rust in the car. And I started putting it together back then, and it took 10 years to complete, with some of the Max-Wedge parts being pretty difficult to come up with. But been a real labor of love over a 15-year period.
Being a clone, which the viewers all know, you take a car and you make it a little different model than it used to be, based on what that original car was. And clones, it's amazing what's happened with clones as far as the Barrett-Jackson auctions over the last few years. People used to really look down their nose at clones, and now they're paying almost full tilt for them. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I was a little surprised at this year's Barrett-Jackson when a clone car brought more money than a genuine piece, but it makes me smile a lot. Mm-hmm. It used to be pretty well poo-pooed to do this sort of thing, but now everybody's catching on to the fact that the original cars are very rare, very expensive, and you wouldn't drive one on the street. So why not have something that you like and something that appeals to people and still be able to drive it on the street? So it's,
Being a clone, how far into did you go? I mean, do we have all the right chalk marks in all the right places?
Well, not necessarily. I didn't get too carried away with it. I've gone with the proper intake and carburetors, the proper exhaust manifolds, that sort of thing, the right era slicks on the car. But as far as putting an aluminum front end on the car, no, I didn't do that. It's an all-steel car, and we put a lot of miles on it in a year, as you well know. We do a lot of shows. It's never lived on a trailer, and I'm real proud of that. So,
why do you think it is that I'm an old guy, and I remember when these were brand new, and everybody wanted a Chev or a Ford, and then they would get a Mopar product. And the Ford and Chev guys learned real quick that those Mopars scooted right along, but they were financially for decades, they were far behind General Motors and Ford cars, and nowadays they have, in a lot of cases, I almost use the word most cases, they have surpassed General Motors and Ford in values.
well, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that these cars, I mean, if you look at this car, the 62 and the 63, they were not real eye appealing as opposed to a 62 Impala or a 63 Ford Galaxy. And a lot of them went to the boneyard. So there's a whole lot less of these around. And people are starting to realize that that's a pretty cool looking car. It's kind of goofy looking, but there's not too many of them around.
Tell us a little bit about the running gear in this.
Well, the motor's out of a 69 Chrysler Imperial. It's a 375 horse motor. Started out as life as a 375. I had the heads ported matched for the 426 intake and exhaust, and the heat passages blocked, so it was all compatible. That in itself was kind of a trial and error deal. There was no one had written any articles on how to do it. I just kind of had to fumble through it until I came up with a procedure that worked. And after a couple of tries, got everything sealed up and working right. And the motor's been together now almost 10 years. It's been trouble-free, absolutely trouble-free. It's got an Art Car torque converter in it, a 3,000 stall-speed converter. It's got a Pat Blaze torque flight in it, all of which has been hooked up for better than 10 years now, and it's been totally trouble-free. And it's got an 8 3/4 drop-in rear end out of a 68 Cornet, and that's pretty much it as far as upgrading on the drivetrain.
Mm-hmm. So this is real streetable. You no problem getting to and from these car shows.
Very streetable. I drove it over here today, only a matter of about 10 miles, but I've gone to runs that are a couple hundred miles each way, and we've never had a drop of trouble with the car. It's never failed me once.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know why I know that this is a great car?
How's that?
When we started, it was almost raining, and now at the end of the interview, the sun is starting to come out.
Did the Chevy guys get that kind of action?
No, they didn't. Thank you, George, very much for being on the show.
My pleasure.
All right, thanks.
Enjoyed it.
The Vintage Vehicle Show travels all over the United States shooting car shows and collections, and as we travel around, we hear about certain people. Well, BIFF LENIHAN is one of the people that we have heard about over and over. You are a established drag racer. In fact, you come from a long line of drag racers, is that right?
Yes, currently right now we have 3 generations drag racing, myself, my son, and my grandson. I run pro mod cars and dragsters. My son runs a pro car, and then my grandson runs a junior dragster, and we're all under Black Irish Racing.
All right, well, tell us a little bit about this car.
Well, this car has been a race car all its life, ever since I've had it, since actually 70. It's a 69. And I decided to do something that most of the purists don't do. I decided to cut it up, tub it, and make it a full-blown race car. Because everybody who knows the Dukes of Hazzard, the 69 Chargers, absolutely love the car, including all the women. And from that standpoint, the appeal of it is just a beautiful car. It has beautiful lines. It's aerodynamically designed. It's a very fast car. And so I just decided to go another way. I might have been one of the first guys ever to pro street a car, but I decided to do it with the most sought after Hemi car that there is, and that's a 69 Dodge Charger.
And what kind of reaction have you got from the purists?
Well, the purists absolutely turn the other way, and the people that like pro street cars and hot rod cars, they absolutely love it, because if you look at the car, there isn't a ripple. It's as straight as an arrow, even though it ran down to quarter-mile pass for over 10 years.
And the times when it was going down the quarter mile?
I'd run about 975s to 10.0s with it, and at that particular time in the late 70s, we had to improve the roll cages in it, and I didn't want to cut the car up anymore. So I have a number of Mopars at home that I run that are full dedicated race cars, and this just is it's just a street. I like to race all the little rice rockets is what I really like to do.
Well, the purists in the hobby that you're referring to, are they aware that everything seems to be changing in that clones are more acceptable and altering cars are more acceptable, and that seems to be really the case with Mopar products?
Absolutely, and the reason being is you just can't find them anymore. And if a person has a passion, to me, a clone is just as nice as a real car, because it's how you do it. It's the personality that comes out in the car. But they just didn't make enough of the cars, enough of the real cars, and so us old timers who have always loved these cars, you have to have some avenue, and so the avenue that is afforded to us is getting a car and making a clone out of it.
And the avenue to this, your background is such that you sought out this car, you thought this is a car that I really want, or you saw this particular car and thought, hey, I can do something with this?
Well, in 1964, I started racing my very first car, which is a 64 GTO, and I set a B-stock record, national record with it, but I always loved the 69 Chargers. This Charger, I found out, the fella that originally had it only had it for a couple of months. I made him an offer that he couldn't refuse. I ended up with a car, and then I decided to put it through different formations. First of all, I tubbed it, then with the engine, and then Dennis Smythe, who is a famous Mopar builder, did most of the engine work in it. Actually, it looks like a 426, but it's actually a 498 stroked out Hemi, running roughly detuned right now about 750 horsepower.
Biff, thank you very much for being on the Vintage
much.
Vehicle
Thank
Show.
you.
This is a very flashy car.
Thank you very much.
Right.
I appreciate it.
The Vintage Vehicle Show has been on the air now for about 13 years, and about 11 or 12 years ago, this fine gentleman, Rick Alexander, gave us the graciousness of his time, and we talked about this very car. Well, Rick, I think it's time to talk about it again.
Yes, I'm glad to see you again, Lance, and
we're both alive and well. We're both kicking.
yes, we are.
Yeah, that's a good sign. In fact, you look better than you did then.
You think so?
And I do too, right?
Yes, you do.
Yeah, right. Okay, tell us about your 1969 Super B six-pack.
I purchased this car approximately 15 years ago. Did a 4-year restoration in my garage. It's a numbers matching, all stock, 39,000 original miles. Super B, and it was purchased new in Clovis, New Mexico.
And how did it end up here?
The first owner brought it up here, put it in a garage for 22 years, and then I found out about it and worked on him for about oh, 6-8 months, and he finally sold it to me.
And this is a real one. This isn't a clone.
This is a real 6-pack car. The only thing I've done right now is the stock engine makes the car worth a lot of money. So I've taken it out, put it away. This is a 500 cubic inch crate engine from Chrysler that Dennis Smythe, well-known engine builder here for Mopar, took the engine apart and redid it, balanced it, blueprinted it, and did some head work.
Muscle cars have been immensely popular since the day they first hit the showroom. Why do you think, I mean, you know, it feels great to drive one of these, but why do you think it has just gotten even more and more and more intense over the years?
Well, Mopar, for example, this car, there was 1,100 6-pack Super Bs and there was 420 hardtops. Well, compared to 350,000 Chevelles or 396 Chevelles and were made the same year. So the Mopars are very rare, and I've had one of my friends sell his Super B 6-pack car just like mine at Barrett-Jackson this last year, and it went for $216,000.
$216,000 for a car that 20 years ago would have gone for what, $6,000?
Probably about 12 then. That brand new, this car was $4,300.
Any advice for somebody, let's say, you know, somebody that does just have $12,000 to work with now, but they want a muscle car? What would you advise?
They're for sale. They're not going to be in the greatest condition, but somebody's got to start somewhere, and if you're good with a wrench.
So somebody can go out and get a Duster and maybe drop a bigger motor in it, and that's a good place to start?
Well, Chrysler Corporation probably has more performance parts, engines, and everything for all these old muscle cars, more than Chevy or Ford does. So it'd be easy to rebuild an old Mopar.
Well, tell us a little bit about your engine. Specifically, you have something unusual on your carburation system. What is that?
A friend of mine, Dennis, and I have designed a plastic insert that goes over the top of the carburetors to protect them and to kind of show them off, so nobody can throw anything in there or the wind can't blow any debris in them. And it's a showpiece.
And this particular motor, you in the distant past, you pulled this out and just went through one end to the other, top to bottom, front to back?
Yes, like I said, my engine builder tore a brand new engine apart and put different bearings in it, balanced, blueprinted it. We think it's a little over 600 horse. I dynoed it, and we had 436 horse at the rear wheels. So I've raced it a few times at the local raceway.
And what kind of times have you had?
12.2 is my fastest.
Rick, I know you're proud of this car, but something happened at this show last year that let you earn even more pride in this car. Is that right?
Yes, last year there was, if I'm right, there was 360 cars at the show from, I know some of them from Alberta, and from Northern California, and my car was lucky enough to take Best of Show.
Well, Rick, it's definitely one of the best cars we've ever had on the Vintage Vehicle Show, so thank you very much for sharing it with us.
Thank you, Lance.
All right, thanks. Dennis BREVIK, this is a very cool 1970 Plymouth Road Runner, and I understand this is original and you are the original owner of this.
That is correct, sir. I bought the car back in January 26, 1970.
And what made you, I noticed you showed me your paperwork, the original paperwork on this, and you were driving a 68 Ford at the time, so you traded in a 2-year-old car on this.
Yes, I did. The Ford was painted like a robin, or darker than robin jig blue, and in the Boeing parking lot up at Everett, every other car was blue. So I thought I'd buy a car that stood out and I wouldn't lose it in the parking lot after working a 12-hour shift.
I would imagine that in 1970 there weren't a whole lot of this lime colored in that parking lot.
No, it was original, and everybody thought it was kind of a yucky color because the wheels were green too. It had dog dish hubcaps on it, and it did look kind of ugly, all that much green. But once I put the American Mag, actual genuine American magnesium wheels on it, it just was total metamorphosis. I think it looks a lot better now.
What made you decide back in 1970 that you wanted, this is a hot rod? What made that choice for you?
Well, actually, the hot rod came with the package. I bought it so that I wouldn't lose my car after a 12-hour shift. And it just happened to be a high-performance 446 pack. It was, if it would have had a Hemi or a Slant 6 in it, I'd have probably bought either one anyway.
Yeah, it was just the color.
Yes, it was mainly the color. I just couldn't lose another girlfriend because I was late picking her up.
Well, the whole Road Runner thing, it caught on so well. The whole, coyote and beep beep and all that stuff, the whole cartoon thing. Why do you think that had such an appeal to buyers?
Well, because when Mopar built them in those days, they went fast, and they come from the factory built to go. And that was one of the main reasons that they became so popular, I guess.
Mm-hmm. This has something very famous about it, the whole induction on the hood system, how you get air from the outside to the inside. Tell us about that.
It's called an air grabber system, and as you see, the inside of the air grabber system here fits down over the top of this part of the breather system, the air filters, and then of course it goes into the carburetors. I have a switch on the inside on the dash that I can push up or down, and that will run the air grabber up and down. If I want it up, I lift the switch up, the air grabber comes up. It becomes functional probably about 90 miles an hour.
So you're going down the road at 90 miles an hour or whatever, and you don't have that open and everything's running fine, and when you open it up, is it a real noticeable change?
Yes, it is. It will, without moving the gas pedal, the speed will increase about 5 to 7 miles an hour.
Does that have only to do with the velocity of the air going into the carburation or the temperature?
It has a lot to do with the velocity coming into the engine because the carburetors don't have to work so hard drawing the air through, and what it's basically doing is giving it a ram air effect.
With these going for as much money as they do, if somebody wanted to get into the hobby with a Mopar muscle car, what kind of recommendation would you make? Somebody that doesn't have the budget to allow them to go to someplace like Barrett-Jackson.
I would recommend that they find a little old lady who's had one in her garage for the last 35 years.
Yeah, that one that's still left in the country. Well, Dennis, this is a really nice example of a 1970 Plymouth Road Runner, and any parting thoughts, anything you want to say to the viewers?
Yes, I'd like to say 3 more payments and she's all mine.
3 more payments. Well, congratulations on those 3 more coming up,
You
and
bet.
thanks for being on the Vintage Vehicle Show.
You bet.
Well, the sun has finally come out. It's turning into a beautiful spring day here in Bellevue, Washington, and the perfect car to have on a beautiful sunny day, a 1970 Challenger convertible. Bill Pieser, this is a wonderful car.
Thanks, Lance. About 14 months to put it together. This started as a 318 car. We did a complete nut and bolt restoration on it and brought it up to the 70 Hemi Challenger specs, which they only built 9 of these originally, and those are outside of my price range, so I decided I'd build one I could drive.
Yeah, one that fits your budget, and you can actually get out there and maybe take a nick now and then and not have heart failure over.
Don't say that. Yeah. No, it is a joy to drive.
Okay, well this car on a sunny day, this has got to be the best. It couldn't feel any better than going down the road in this, I would guess.
We like it. We load up in it. The family, three of us jump in and take it around the area. It's about a 100-mile car. If I go farther than 100 miles, it'll go in the trailer.
So growing up, were you a Mopar guy? Were you looking for a 70 Challenger or something like it, or is this a recent infatuation?
I grew up working on Chevrolets. I worked on Chevrolets for 20 years, including being a master technician on Chevrolets at one point. But I always had the bug for Mopars. My neighbor, when he went off to the service in '67, bought a '68 Charger RT, and I was infatuated with big inch Mopars from the very beginning.
So when you made the transition from Chevrolets to Mopars, were your Chev buddies aghast?
I didn't have any Chev buddies that I needed to impress. Everybody knew my work, and I just thought it was time for a change, and there's nothing like building one of these Mopars.
And this underwent a major restoration and build at Clyde Mosslanders, correct?
Mosslanders did the body and paint on the car, right? This one was pretty typical of most convertible donors. It had rust around their windshield, it had floor pans need to replace, trunk pan. But after you get through all the rust repair on them, these are fundamentally very sound cars, and there's no reason it shouldn't last another 40 or 50 years now.
Performance on a 426 Hemi?
This one's 518 cubic inches. It's a mild motor. It's 10-to-1 compression and a hydraulic cam. This one's got shade over 625 horsepower. It's a pretty good drive.
So very streetable though, it behaves itself?
This one idles at 800 and drive. So the cam's not too much for it, and it's got a lot of low-end torque. It's very easy to drive.
When you're going down the road, especially on a sunny day with the top down, what kind of reaction are you getting from people around you?
Floor it.
Yeah. They want you to go fast rather than just thumbs up and great car?
Yeah, most of the time they want to hear it, and of course it breaks the tires loose at almost any road speed, so they want to see it.
If somebody wants to get into a high-performance automobile, what kind of advice would you give them? Somebody on a limited budget, say.
On a limited budget, there's a lot better ways to go on a limited budget than a Mopar e-body. But, you know, I think that the engine stuff that's out right now, that's across the board, whether it's Mopar, Ford, or Chevrolet, Edelbrock heads, you know, all the new induction stuff, electronic fuel injection that anybody can set up and run in their garage. That's the greatest part of the hobby right now, is the fact that all the speed parts that were so esoteric a few years ago are accessible to everybody. Crate Hemi conversions into this for the 5.7 Hemi even, that's going to be a big deal going on. New life for the e-bodies with the new motor. So there's a lot of exciting things. That might be my next project, is doing a late Hemi in something.
All right, well, you let us know about your next project so we can have it on the show?
Can do, Lance.
All right. Thank you, Bill. This is a beautiful car.
Hey, thank you so much.
RPM 409. Cheetah slicks. Wide Tuesday. Wide track. Stingray. Power shift. Super stocks. Muscle Beach. Checkered flag. Spray face.
Aaron Reynolds, you have one of the oldest cars here, and this is a long ways from a lot of the muscle cars that are here, but this 1935 Dodge pickup truck is absolutely gorgeous.
Well, thank you very much. I've owned it for about 35 years. My dad bought it for me when I was 16, and it's been a 35-year labor, which finally got done last August.
So 35 years ago, was this some fenders piled in the bed and a bunch of rusty pieces, or what did you start with?
Actually, it was not in too bad of a shape mechanically. It had just had a new engine put in it, not a couple of years before I acquired it. And the body was okay, but needed a little love and attention.
And you spent years and years giving it that love and attention?
Well, on and off. For about the first 30-odd years that I owned it, I was working full-time. So it was kind of a time-to-time weekend project. And then finally, 4 years ago, I finally had some time to devote to it. So then it went along a lot faster.
Yeah. Well, I go to a lot of car shows all over the country, and I probably can count the 35 Dodge trucks on 2 or 3 fingers that I've ever seen, maybe 1 or 2. Do you get that kind of reaction? People, I've never seen one of these before, it's been so long. What kind of reaction?
Well, here in Washington, it's actually kind of interesting because there were a lot of these vehicles in this state. This particular vehicle was sold in Wenatchee, Washington. So there were a lot of farmers in eastern Washington who owned these vehicles. And what people say, provided they're over about 40, is, well, my uncle used to have one of these. So actually a fair number of people have seen them, but then people younger than that, they go, "Joy, that's really cool. I've never seen one of those."
And trying to find parts for a 35 Dodge pickup, a bit of a challenge?
It used to be a lot harder. The eBay has really revolutionized the auto restoration stuff because it's now stuff that used to be really hard to find. You'd have to write letters and then wait for them to get answered and do all this stuff. Now you just look at auctions on eBay, and if you wait long enough, eventually what you want is probably just going to show up.
Going to show up, yeah. Well, a lot of the cars we've looked at today, they have very high-performance motors in them. I'm looking at a 6-cylinder flathead, doesn't look real sophisticated in there.
This is an approximately, on a good day, 80 horsepower, low compression engine, and it depends on what you're interested in doing. I have a bit more of a desire to stay connected with the history. So I like to leave it the way it was because you find out what it was like to drive back 70 years ago. And you don't go 50. When you're going really, really fast, you're going about 45 because it doesn't really like to go much faster than that. And it's a non-synchronized transmission, so you have to hit your shift points or you get to listen to yourself make a mistake. And it's interesting to drive kind of the back roads of the world because the freeways didn't exist back in the 30s. So you get an opportunity sometimes when you're traveling a long ways. You just have to go the route less traveled by.
So this flathead motor that does 45 miles an hour, what is in there? How many cubic inches, how many horsepower?
This is actually a 1946 Plymouth 218. One of the interesting notes about all of the Dodges between 32 and about 52 is you almost never find them with the original engine in them because they're plug compatible. If your engine wore out, you didn't get it rebuilt. You just went out to the wrecking yard and got a new one and threw it in there because you just took it out and put the new one in because it did fit. The transmissions all bolt to each other, so they're very interchangeable. But this is actually a bit more powerful than the original engine, which was a 201.
So at 45 miles an hour, this is a high-performance truck.
Well, it's actually, I have seen some of these vehicles with the flatheads in them that have been performance tuned. And there actually is a lot of stuff you can do, particularly with intake and exhaust manifolds, that will actually get a little more horsepower out of them. But you're talking about upping it from 80 to 95.
Here at the show, as I mentioned, lots of muscle cars. If somebody wants to go this direction in the hobby, they want to get a pre-war pickup truck, what kind of advice would you give them?
Actually, you can find a lot of these vehicles in Hemmings Motor News, on eBay. The primary problem with these old vehicles is you need to get one that the body's not in too bad a shape. I've actually seen vehicles like this where you take your finger and you roll it under the fender like this. It's like paper thin because it's rusted so badly. And you can get some reproduction parts for these things, but basically what you want to, and there's a couple, as with any vehicle, there are a couple of problem areas that even on a vehicle that's in good shape, unless it's been stored indoors, heated, they're going to be rusted out. That's just the nature of the beast. So you focus on those areas just to see if it's really bad or not. But other than that, when you have a vehicle that's made out of 16 gauge sheet steel, it's got to be really, really, really bad before you have something you can't fix.
Back when they made real cars.
Right. Well, back when they made different cars.
Yeah. Well, Aaron, this is a beautiful car/truck. Thank you very much for being on the Vintage Vehicle Show, and I hope a lot of people honk at you on the way home today.
I hope so too. Thank you very much.
It's a 2005 Dodge Magnum RT, has the 5.7 liter 8-cylinder Hemi in it. It came box stock, had silver headlights and moldings. We went out with the 6 cylinders, black headlights and grille, took the moldings off. We dropped her onto a KW Variant 1 suspension, which is adjustable, dropped about 2 inches. It has long tube headers, high flow cats, spoiler exhaust tagged onto it, running some computer programs to get a little bit more horsepower out of it. Added some carbon fiber to the outside and interior. And the hood itself is a custom-made fiberglass hood by RK Sport, and we had the carbon fiber overlaid the whole hood, and then we painted it after filled and blocked. And we just got it out of the shop having a two-tone paint. And unfortunately you can't see it today, but when the sun hits it, the black paint has the same red metallic flake that the red paint has in it, and it really pops out nice. We're going to take it in for dyno tuning, and we're assuming it's getting close to about 400 horsepower right now at the crank. Its stock is 340.
What a great time we've had here at the All Mopar Spring Roundup in Bellevue, Washington. Great cars, great people. Just like we bring you every week, we're going to do it again next week. So until then, see ya.